So dear students, I welcome you to my class and I wish you a very good evening. And after a long lapse of time, I have an opportunity to meet you and I hope you are well. And today I just like to discuss some important points of romantic poetry that you have already finished. So what is romantic poetry, or what is romantic movement, and what is romantic literature? Actually, these terminologies are very, very common, and we are well familiar with these terms, that is romanticism, romantic poetry, romantic literature, romantic movement. So what is romantic movement, or what particular incidents, what behind the rise of romanticism? Actually, we know that industrialization started in Europe from 1750. And with the rise of industrialization, human beings were confined to mills and factories. So people left their fields, that is the field of agriculture, and they came to the urban areas. They became laborers in the mills and factories. So they had an opportunity to earn their livelihood, but their life did not have any stability or any certainty. That is the harmony of life or peace of life, the tranquility of life were destroyed because of the rise of industrialization. So in such a very precarious situation, human beings felt an urge to go back to nature because they were feeling suffocated by the rise of industrialization, by the rise of mechanical civilization, by the rise of capitalism. So they wanted to have a fresh breath in the lap of nature. So that very particular disposition or tendency that worked inside the minds of the people, especially in the second half of 18th century, came up with the shape of romanticism, or came up with the particular ism, and that very particular ism found its way out in romantic movement or romanticism. Okay, and we find the exposure of this romantic disposition in the writers of the second half of 18th century, especially the English writers. And our concentration today is on the romantic poetry. So I will not talk about the philosophers, or I will not talk about the socialists of that time. I will not talk about the prose writers, even the prose writers of that time. I will concentrate my discussion on the poets who responded to this rise of particular disposition and urge to go back to the tranquility of nature, and who responded to this particular disposition. William Blake, you must have heard the name of this poet, and William Blake is called the precursor or bell ringer of romantic movement. Okay, William Blake. And then William Wordsworth, then Percy Bysshe Shelley, John Keats, and Lord Byron. Actually, these are the poets who are included in our curriculum. So my concentration will be focused on these particular poets. And first of all, I just like to tell you something about William Blake. William Blake is called the precursor of Romantic movement. And it is said by many historians that Romantic movement started with William Blake's publication of Songs of Innocence in the year of French Revolution, that is 1789. This book was published, and many historians of English literature believe that this 1789 is the beginning of Romantic movement, though many other historians believe that Romantic movement officially started its campaign or trump with the publication of the lyrical ballads. Lyrical ballads is a book of poetry. 23 poems were there, 19 by William Wordsworth and 4 by S.T. Coleridge. And that very book was published in 1798. So many historians of English literature believe that Romanticism started its movement with the publication of lyrical ballads in 1789, because these poems were different in diction, in stylistics, in subject matter from the poems of neoclassical age. The neoclassical age, which was just immediately before the Romantic age. And you must have heard the names of some neoclassical writers, for example, Alexander Pope, then Henry Fielding, or Samuel Richardson, and Horace Walpole, Thomas Gray, then Jonathan Swift, Daniel Defoe, and many other writers belong to neoclassical age or the period. Our discussion is now concentrated on Romantic poets. So anyway, many people believe that with the publication of Songs of Innocence in 1789, Romantic movement started. So why? Because many elements of Romanticism, for example, love for nature, love for lyricism or music, love for simplicity, then subjectivity, then love for liberty, democracy, common people. These elements are available in Blake's Songs of Innocence, which was published in 1789, and even in Songs of Experience, which was published 4 years later, that is in 1793. And for that reason, William Blake is popularly known as the bell ringer of Romantic movement. That is, he rings the bell of Romantic movement. And William Wordsworth, then Samuel Taylor Coleridge, Percy Bysshe Shelley, John Keats, Lord Byron responded to that bell. But William Wordsworth, with his publication of Preface to the Lyrical Ballads in 1802, officially started or declared or heralded the beginning of Romantic movement. So one thing that you must not forget, there are many elements of Romanticism in Shakespeare, but we do not call Shakespeare the founder of Romantic movement. There are many elements of Romanticism in Jonathan Swift or Alexander Pope, in John Dryden, or even in John Milton, but we do not call them the founder of Romantic movement. We call especially William Wordsworth the founder of Romantic movement. Why? Because he has theorized Romanticism with his publication of Preface to the Lyrical Ballads in 1802. And in that very preface, we find a new definition of romantic poetry. We find, or we are acquainted with the diction of romantic poetry. And Wordsworth has also referred to the subject matter of romantic poetry. And he has also defined the poet, that is, who is a poet. So in this way, Wordsworth has brought about a kind of discipline in the conception of romanticism in his preface to the lyrical ballads. For that reason, Wordsworth is called the founder of romantic movement. And Samuel Taylor Coleridge is called the co-founder of romantic movement. Why? Because it is said that Preface to the Lyrical Ballads, which was published in 1802, was the half-brain child of S.T. Coleridge. And it is said that Wordsworth used to discuss every point of the preface during the day, and at night he used to write. So whatever he has written or incorporated into this preface has partially come from the brain of Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Though later, that is in 1817, Coleridge published his Biographia Literaria. And in Biographia Literaria, Coleridge contradicted many things of the preface. But in 1802, Coleridge supported Wordsworth's conception of poet, conception of poetry, conception of poetic diction, conception of the language of poetry. For that reason, we call Samuel Taylor Coleridge the co-founder of Romantic movement. So anyway, now I like to draw your attention to this screen. The slide that you find here is about William Wordsworth, the founder of Romantic movement. And he was born in 1770 and he died in 1850. And he was also the poet laureate. And William Wordsworth's poems that you have read are intimations of immortality from recollections of early childhood and Tintanebbie. And you have, so far I believe, you have also gone through some sonnets of William Wordsworth. Wordsworth has produced more than 500 sonnets, so he is also a great sonneteer. Intimations of immortality. I just like to tell you something about this particular text. What are the main themes of this text? At first, let me tell you that it's a poem and it is an irregular ode because the length of the stanzas that you find here are not harmonious. Some stanzas contain 9 lines or 11 lines, and some other stanzas contain more than 30 lines. So the length of a stanza is not unified here. And even the rhyme scheme or meters are not unified here. Some lines are written in iambic pentameter, some are written in trochaic meter, and some other lines are written in anapaestic meter. So thus we find a sort of amalgamation of different things here. For that reason, we call it an irregular ode. And this is a serious poem, Intimations of Immortality from Recollections of Early Childhood. This is based on Platonic philosophy, that is the conception of human soul. Plato also believed that human souls were in heaven before birth, and this world is nothing but an unreal shadow of heaven, and human souls will go back to heaven after the death of human bodies. And that very particular belief is reflected in this poem. For that reason, this poem is a philosophic poem also. You must not misunderstand, or you must not develop a misconception that romantic poets are not philosophic. Romantic poets show their inclination to the use of the language of the common people, or to use the common people as their protagonists, or they are very much fond of using very simple diction. But you must not think that they are not philosophic. Romantic poets are philosophic. This very poem, Intimations of Immortality, is a philosophic poem. I will explain it elaborately. I just like to take you back to William Blake. Suppose his poem, The Lamb, and the poem, The Tiger, or The Chimney Sweepers, or even the introductory poem of Songs of Innocence. All these poems are highly philosophical. And in some poems, Blake is obscure or inscrutable. That is, if you want to understand William Blake, you should have a very clear understanding of contemporary philosophy, the philosophy of Rousseau, the philosophy of Montesquieu, the philosophy of John Locke. You should have very clear ideas about existentialism if you try to understand William Blake. You have to understand capitalism, though capitalism was not theorized at that time, but capitalism was extant in the then society. You must not think that capitalism started with Karl Marx. Capitalism was also available. The elements of capitalism are available even in Ramayana and Mahabharata. If you read these two epics, you will find there the elements of capitalism. So if you try to understand William Blake's The Tiger or The Chimney Sweepers from Songs of Experience and from Songs of Innocence also, you will find that Blake is highly philosophical. You will find the elements of capitalism there. The chimney sweepers work from dawn to dusk. They take up the risk of their life. And whom do they serve? They serve the capitalists of the society. That is the rich people of the society. And these rich people do not treat them as human beings. They treat them as the factory of labor. Actually, this is the attitude of modern days capitalists towards their subordinates or towards the laborers who serve them. So you will find the elements of capitalism in Songs of Experience and even in Songs of Innocence. So you have to read William Blake from philosophic perspective. Okay, so I just like to let you know that while approaching these romantic poets, we should have a philosophic mindset. Otherwise, our reading of these poets may be misreading. So we just want to avoid misreading. We want to read and reread and discover something new there. So anyway, Platonic philosophy is reflected here, and treatment of childhood is also here. Wordsworth has described from his own childhood experience. He has said that while he was a child, he saw celestial glory in every form of nature. Just look at this quotation. These are the introductory lines of this poem. There was a time when meadow, grove, and stream, the earth and every common sight to me did seem apparent in celestial light. The glory and the freshness of a tree is not now as it had been of yore, done wheresoever I may, by night or day. The things which I have seen, I now can see no more. So you will here see the tone or hear the tone of loss and gain. Loss and gain. So what does the poet lose? The poet loses the celestial glory that he enjoyed during his childhood. And during his maturity, he does not find this celestial glory. This is the loss. Okay. And what is the gain? What does he gain? Wordsworth has said that during maturity, We can have a philosophic mind. If we look around, we can read the significance of nature. That is quite impossible during our childhood. So the nature which is lying in front of us is a strange book, and we can read many strange lessons there, not in our childhood, in our maturity. Actually, this is the gain, and this gain compensates the loss of childhood, that is the celestial glory. Okay, and you will find that the poet is lamenting over the loss of celestial glory in these lines. If you read these lines, I think you will find here. The rainbow comes and goes, and the lovely is the rose. The moon doth doth with delight. Look round her when the heavens are bare. Waters on a starry night. Waters are on a starry night, are beautiful and fair. The sunshine is a glorious but yet I know wherever I go, that there have passed away a glory from the earth. So the poet laments over the celestial glory that has departed from this earth. Okay. Now here on this screen, you will find Plato here with some of his disciples. Aristotle and other disciples are with him. You know, Plato's significant, invaluable disciple is Aristotle. Sometimes disciple makes his master great. And this is true. We find it in the history of Greek philosophy. Plato is the disciple of Socrates, and Plato has made his master Socrates great. Okay, so this is possible when a disciple lives in the mind and spirit of a master. Anyway, here you will find Platonic philosophy. That is, when a child comes to this earth, he comes from heaven and he bears the inheritance of heaven, that is celestial glory. And when the child grows into a boy into a young man into an old man, gradually he loses that celestial glory. And ultimately, he finds no reflection of heavenly glory in any aspect of nature. But Wordsworth says that for that very loss, we need not lament, because we obtain another gift. And what's that gift? A philosophic mind. So here you find some children enjoying themselves. And these children are called prophets by William Wordsworth. Wordsworth has called them mighty prophet, seer blessed, on whom those truths do rest, which we are toiling all our lives to find, in darkness lost the darkness of the grave. So this is Wordsworth's treatment of child. To Wordsworth, a child is a philosopher, a child is a prophet, because a child bears the inheritance, the heritage of heaven. And due to this heritage, he finds celestial glory in every object of nature. So anyway, the celestial glory goes out or fades out with the development of a child into a boy into a man into an old man. And ultimately, that very man finds significance in every object of nature. And even the meanest flower that blooms unseen, unattended, becomes a strange book to a philosophic observer, because that very observer finds strange lessons there. So just look at these lines. Actually, these are the last lines of the poem, intimations of immortality from recollections of early childhood. The clouds that gather round the setting sun to take a sober coloring from an eye that hath kept watch over man's mortality. Another race hath been, and other palms are won. Thanks to the human herd by which we live, thanks to its tenderness, its joys and fears. To me, the meanest flower that blows can give thoughts that do often lie too deep for tears. So even the meanest flower provides a philosophic observer with very significant and very, very speculated lessons. So for that reason, the poet does not lament over the loss of celestial glory. So thus we find that this poem, Intimations of Immortality, this poem is about loss and gain, loss of celestial glory and gain of a philosophic mind. And you will also find the glorification of childhood here. The child is called a prophet, the child is a philosopher, the child is also a seer, the child has very intimate connection with heaven. So these are some of the technical aspects of this poem. Just look at this slide, you will find here some important. Yes. Okay. If you have any question, please, you may question me. So it's an irregular ode. Use of blank verse, that is, you will find a mixture of different verses here. Iambic meter, trocade meter, and anapestic meter here. Okay. Then use of epigraph. The poem begins with an epigraph. The child is father of the man, and I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural fighting. So these are the lines that you will find at the beginning of this poem, and this is called epigraph. Epigraph is a quotation at the inception of a writing, and it refers to the genesis or the content of the text that you are going to recite. And here are some questions, and I think you have got these questions beforehand. And I have also recommended a book here, Romantic Imagination. It is written by C.M. Bowra. It's a very common book, and I think this book is available. You have to collect this book and read a particular chapter dedicated to this particular poem, and I think you will get many new ideas from this particular chapter of this book. There are so many books. I have suggested this book only, and if you are interested, I can suggest some more books later. Okay. Now I like to give you some ideas about Tintern Abbey. Tintern Abbey is a magnificent poem, and it is called that. It is called a true gem of Wordsworth's poetic creation. And this poem is structurally divided into 3 sections, from line number 1 to 22. The first section dedicated to the description of nature. From line number 23 to 130 is dedicated to Wordsworth's development of thought about nature. And lines 114 onwards, you will find how Wordsworth pays his glowing tribute to Dorothy Wordsworth, his sister, Dorothy, who accompanied Wordsworth during his visit to Tintern Abbey. And Wordsworth visited Tintern Abbey 2 times. And this poem is composed on his experience of his second visit in 1798. In 1798, this poem was published in his lyrical ballads. Okay. And if you think of the first few lines, you will find how this lapse of time, that is the lapse of 5 years between his 2 visits, impacted his poetic mind. 5 years have passed, 5 summers with the length of 5 long winters. So 5 has been repeated here thrice. Why? Wordsworth refers to how this lapse of 5 years has brought about significant changes and development of his attitude towards nature. For that reason, he has repeated this word 5 thrice. Okay. So, dear students, at this very particular point of my lecture, I just like to let you know that within a few seconds, we will go off because Zoom apps will not allow us to stay more than 40 minutes in our class. So I think after this session is over, I do request you to reconnect, okay, because I will continue my discussion and finish my lecture today. So 5 years have passed, 5 summers with the length of 5 long winters. And again I hear these waters rolling from their mountain springs. So Wordsworth refers to the time that he spent during his lapse of these 2 Egypts, that is, before he